Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of I Am I. My name is Joshua Ansley, and I got a little bit of a mad scientist thing going on, I feel like. Alright, so today I want to talk about some tonight, it's a little late. It's like the last fucking minute, wait until the 11th hour. It literally is amidst the 11th hour that this is happening. So I want to talk about a little Jedi shit, some Jedi training that I got here for you guys. This is some serious Jedi training. It's from the Bhagavad Gita, right? It's one of my favorite passages from the Bhagavad Gita, favorite couple verses, right? Bhagavad Gita, ancient Hindu text, a bunch of really cool shit in there. But some of my favorite verses are. It's in chapter 2, verse 62 and 63. And basically what it talks about, it's basically the downfall of humankind. It's like, when you understand this mechanism that you're operating, because none of us really do, we don't really take the time to really, and we think we do, we just have no fucking clue. It's amazing how ignorant we are of so much, and how this world works, and how we work, and everything, and it's astounding. But when we start to actually understand the way this mechanism of this human being actually works, and it's just one modality, right? Is the yogic principles or Vedantic philosophy or whatever other philosophy you might use in some sort of Hindu philosophy or any other one. It's just, they're all gonna have to like argue about what the fuck is right or different, and like even within, these different factions go off, and it's Advaita and Dvaita and different, all this. It's such silly shit. It really doesn't fucking matter. But it does, to take some sort of to take this look, to start getting a deeper understanding of ourselves, right? So chapter 2, verse 62 and 63 is basically the downfall of humankind and how it starts. And basically how it starts is what I always talk about. It's like, the big shadows. Is the downfall happens from when we stop looking inward and understanding that we are already this divine core, this wholeness, this completeness, this fulfillment that we can get from within, and we already are that space of eternal consciousness, right? And when we don't recognize that out of ignorance, so we start going out into the external world through the senses to try to get some sort of satiation, some happiness, to relieve the suffering in some way, right? And it's natural. It happens through the indriya, through the senses. As soon as we're born, it's what happens. We start, again, as Christians refer to it as original sin, and people like whether there's sin or not. It's basically, this sin is this idea. It's not that it's bad to go into the physical world, right? But it's just happening from an ignorance of the fact that you are already healed, fulfilled, and complete and divine at your core. So when you start going into the external world for it, you start doing fucked up shit in order to get whatever the hell it is that you want, and you start going against even your own beliefs and and all this destruction. That is like, the sin is really going against your own self, is really what it is. It's the ignorance of not knowing that you are this space. So these two verses basically explain how it goes down, right? And how it starts is when you start going into the external world through your senses to find that space, your mind starts dwelling on it. It's all in the mind. All of it is the fucking mind. It is the mind that keeps you from heaven. It is the mind that keeps you in hell. It is the mind that keeps you, and I say the both of those because you're not just in heaven or hell, right? You could just be in purgatory, which is just kind of like, waiting to get somewhere, right? Waiting to go to heaven, waiting to recognize that you're fucking already there, right? So it's not just being in hell or in heaven, right? So it's this space that when we go into the physical world, the mind starts dwelling on that object, whatever it is in the world, right? So the senses see this beautiful fucking woman or piece of cake or whatever the heck it is for you, right? Alexis, whatever the thing it is that you start going into the external world, and your mind through the senses be like, that is a nice piece of ass right there, little flesh, beautiful fucking whatever, right? And the mind starts dwelling on it, and it just starts thinking about that. So instead of like focusing on what you should be doing, or I don't like to use should, but whatever the task at hand is, you start looking through the senses. Well, look at that, the curve on that oh man, she's gorgeous, and just, and like you start looking at that and you can't stop dwelling on it. So that's the first step, is your mind dwells on it. The second step is attachment. From dwelling on it, you go to attachment. Attachment is just really as a result of thought flow. So the thoughts now, instead of going where they are, because you have an untrained mind, it's not able to continue what it's doing, and it comes from that dwelling through the senses on that space that you start, the thought flow keeps going over there, over there, over there, and now you become attached. Attachment defined as anything without which we would not be okay, so that we need in order for us to be okay, right? So this attachment to something else without which we're just screwed, right? So the dwelling happens, and then the thought flow happens, and that leads to attachment, right? So then after that comes desire, right? So from the attachment, a desire derives. So we're like, okay, now I have this attachment to it, and we're like, without which, okay, so now I have a desire for it. This all happens in a split second too, by the way, and we just don't even recognize it, right? We're just like, and life's a mess, right? So from that attachment derives desire. There's a desire that results thinking, I now want that. Yeah, look at that attachment is now bringing me in, and I want that thing, right? So from desire, then the result is anger. Anger is a modification of desire. We have a desire for something, we want it, something gets in the way and impedes us from being able to get it, and as a result, then we have anger, right? It's one of the reasons why we have anger. And it could be anger, jealousy, whatever negative emotion comes out of that space, right? So your neighbor to the left of you has a Lexus, the neighbor to the right of you has a Lexus, and you have a piece of shit 28-year-old, Toyota or something like that. I don't know, 28-year-old, it's probably, and then it's a beautiful classic car. So you have this piece of shit that you don't have this Lexus, and you want this Lexus, and everybody else has a Lexus. So now it's just like there's jealousy, and there's anger at yourself because you should have fucking been able to get that job, or anger at the person, their client, who didn't pay you the way they should have, or whatever the heck comes out, right? All this space of, because it's something that you can't get what you want, and that anger is a result of that desire, right? The modification of that desire. And then out of that anger comes delusion. Sometimes a little bit more appropriately, infatuation, right? So there's this delusion and this infatuation with this thing that you now need to have, right? And there's, because you're in this deluded space of that, whatever that emotionally turbulent space is, right? Now you have that delusion that results from it, because you're not able to think clearly. Your mind is not clear. It's the emotions that are now scattered up and causing all this issue, right? And from that delusion, you now have a loss of memory. It's translated directly as loss of memory. What that really means is a loss of memory as the loss of your own understanding of your own values, that you forget what is important to you. I hesitate to say the right thing to do, the difference between right and wrong and all that kind of stuff. But really, what is right and wrong for you and what you understand your personal values to be is like you lose these values that are maybe even beyond whether what you've been taught or beyond what you've been taught, losing the memory of understanding on a deeper core what is actually good to you. Maybe you don't even know what that is, right? These deeper sense of values that you've forgotten, these forgotten values now, because you're lost in this quagmire of shit and delusion. And then from that loss of memory of those values, then comes the loss of intellect. The intellect is the ability to discern, to make the decision-making happen, right? So without that ability to have that decision-making process in life, then we're fucked. Then we go do stupid shit. Then we're like, justifying taking the money from our boss because, we do all this extra work and we don't get paid for it and blah, 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 and justifying all this bullshit and being like, yeah, that makes sense. I did that, or that was totally justified for me to, fucking kill that person and take their Lexus or whatever it is, fucked up shit that you might do for a Lexus. I don't know. So that is the order of destruction, because then after that, loss of intellect, without intellect, without the ability to discern and make that decision, we're fucked. Then we have no ability to proceed in a healthy way in life, right? And that all happens can happen in a split second, right? So it goes from dwelling on it, to attachment, to desire, to anger, to delusion, to loss of memory, to loss of intellect, and destruction, right? And this is the order of how it happens. This is the Jedi process. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate, right? Dwelling leads to attachment. Attachment leads to desire. Desire leads to anger. Anger leads to loss of memory. Loss of memory leads to loss of intellect. Loss of intellect leads to destruction. Okay? That is the process. And this is you can be like, well, what about this step or this step? It's just understanding that this was a 2,500-year-old text, right? That this psychology was present, and it's amazing the psychology that they were aware of 2,500 years ago, that these rishis were aware of. That happens in a split second within this mechanism. And when we recognize that we are not special, which of course you're all fucking snowflakes and you're all absolutely special, you're all beautiful, divine expressions of love on this planet, right? But when we recognize that we're not special and that we're not different in the way we operate, when you recognize that when you're textbook in some ways, that if you know that you're textbook, then there's a textbook way out of it, then hey, cool, I know that I operate this way, that the human mechanism operates this way, so that when you can see yourself having an emotional response, that anger, greed, jealousy, fear, anxiety, doubt, these are all human things that we can have and that we're supposed to have. Right? And there's ways to work into that and healthy ways to work through them instead of shunning them and pretending we don't have them or that they don't exist, right? And we don't even know that we're doing that, so many of us, right? So this space allows us to recognize that this age-old philosophy had this psychology in it already, and then some, because then it also adds the divine core of our own nature. So if you recognize that divine core, that eliminates so much of this process. So it doesn't even mean that desire is bad. It doesn't mean that these things are bad. It means that if you can understand that they're happening in this way, in this order, you can stop them at any given point along the process. The best way is to learn to start to train that mind to not be dwelling on it. How to dwell on it, to train the mind to dwell in an appropriate space like the divine core of your own nature, right? And that is a powerful space to be in. That, my friends, is some fucking Jedi-ass training. Little by little, one day at a time, you can work into this deeper level of ourselves and see this mechanism operating for the way that it operates. And that is humility. That is humility. When you can actually step back and when you start to see the worst part, I can see in a lot of the transformational work that I do with people is when they know that they're doing it and they're just observing their mind still do it and their mind still wants to go to it and they're like, but I know it's not even good for me and I don't want to do it and like blah, 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 blah. And it's very difficult. But that's part of the process, right? Is that that conditioning is so ingrained in us, that vibrational frequency of sitting in that lower vibrational state is so ingrained in us that it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of awareness, and awareness fucking sucks at first. You know, it's not a pleasant thing, but then you learn to have choice, and then you learn to change the way you relate to things. And then you learn to be okay while you go through those emotional states. So you learn to be okay as you go out into the world and fucking get bigger and bigger in your life and have more experience and more interaction and bigger experiences because you're okay, because you can handle it from that place of stability within yourself. It's beautiful. So that is verse 62 and 63 of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. Yetch! In Lakesh Lakin, I am you, you are me. Namaste. What? Too much?